Hi guys. So the Australian housing market is a cruel betrayal, and I think anyone with even the smallest moral compass can see that. Obviously, Albo doesn't care, as he is making the problem much worse with his big Australia open borders policy. Anyone who was hoping that Albo was going to do something to address the insane housing market after the completely manipulated, unrealistic rises since COVID, I have got a bridge to sell you, I'm afraid. Now don't get me wrong, the Liberals will be just as bad, but probably no worse. It is extremely hard to be worse than Albo with this regard. So how will this insane housing crisis be corrected? Can it be corrected? For the good of the country it should, but Albo is not going to take his foot off the immigration pedal. It's funny really, the guy was so keen to give First Nations people the voice, yet according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and you can see the link to this in the description, there were only 983,700 Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people in Australia in 2021, which makes them very much in the minority. In fact, they make up just 3.8% of the population. Now obviously being in the minority is not good for them, which is why Albo said he wanted to give them the voice. But he, personally, is making their plight so much worse by inviting nearly twice their entire population into Australia just during his tenure. They are being further marginalised, and they are the very people most affected by the housing crisis. Can Albo not see the hypocrisy of what he is doing, or does the Ponzi always come first? So a lot of people don't fully understand the reality of the Australian housing market. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, once again there's a link in the description to this, tells us that the value of residential dwellings in Australia rose by $130.7 billion to $11.366 trillion just this quarter. But it's obvious to anyone who thinks about it for a little while that this is not the true value. It is the artificially manipulated value, and the manipulation is being done by Albo with his foot hard on the accelerator pedal for immigration. Think about it. House prices have more than doubled in many places since COVID, and ask yourself why. Now the government's tried to make out like it was because people were working from home more and moving from other areas like Melbourne to the Gold Coast, for example. But if that were true, then some areas would have went up and some areas would have went down. But that didn't happen because everywhere went up. It's just that some places went up a lot more than others. Now the oldest trick in the book to raise prices is to manipulate the supply and demand ratio. All a corrupt government has to do is increase demand by bringing too many people in, and this will put immense pressure on the fixed supply and prices will jump. So the total value of residential dwellings in Australia is over $11 trillion apparently. Okay, so what happens if Albo's foot comes off the immigration accelerator pedal? If you wasn't aware, Australia is building more homes per capita than almost any country in the world, but it still can't keep up with the number of people Albo's letting in. So what if the number of people coming in does stop and Albo grows a conscience? Now this will mean that the supply will eventually catch up with demand. It's common knowledge that Australians can't even afford to have kids anymore, because the insane cost of housing and the birth rate is now just 1.5. There's a link in the description showing this. Obviously, because of Albo's actions, this will only get worse because young people have no hope at all in this new dystopian Hunger Games housing situation. And people need hope to start a family. Now, the birth rate has to be 2.1 just to keep the population level. So as you can see, with a birth rate of just 1.5, if left alone, the population would be decreasing rapidly. So if Albo could do the right thing, house prices at least would come down to 2019 levels across the board. But let's face it, even then house prices were too high. So think about it. A house is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And if several people are competing for a house, the house prices shoot up, which is what's happened. Now the opposite happens if there are no new buyers getting shipped into the country. You only have to look over the ditch at what's happening in New Zealand to see what Australia would be like without Albo doing what he is doing. I actually have a channel that closely follows the New Zealand housing market, and I'll put a link to that in the description if anyone wants to go over and subscribe. Now if Albo stopped massively increasing the population, the supply of stock for sale would rise fast. Now I suspect that this would cause panic in the market, because deep down everyone knows that prices are unrealistic and there would be a rush to the exit of investors trying to cash in their immense profits. The only thing keeping house prices so high right now is Albo, and that's a fact. Will he ever do the right thing and let reality kick in for the good of the country? No, he probably won't. It's going to take something serious to bring prices back down to reality. And in my next video, I'll be looking at the number of Australian bad loans. And I will explain why the increase in these non-performing loans may be the catalyst that the country needs to bring some semblance of fairness back. This Albo-supported intergenerational theft has to stop, or Australia will be completely hollowed out, unless new Australians will be born, just to keep an insidious, artificially inflated Ponzi alive. Now Albo should be ashamed of himself. A so-called Labour Party leader acting the way he is sickening. Now I would expect this treachery from the likes of Dutton, but why would anyone bother to become the leader of a so-called working man's party if everything they did was against your average worker? Make it make sense, please, people. So yeah, guys, many more videos to come, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers for that.